All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pursue or Pass, 5 steps to confidently evaluate if you should apply for this grant. This workshop is being recorded and slides will be shared afterwards, so please keep your eyes peeled for a follow-up email later in case you want to review anything from today. In case it's your first time here, this free grant workshop is brought to you by Instrumentl. These are free educational opportunities for grant professionals and nonprofit professionals, where our goal is to tackle a problem that you all often have to solve for, while also sharing different ways that Instrumentl's platform can help you in winning more grants. Instrumentl is the all-in-one grants platform that you'll love. If you want to bring grant prospecting, tracking, and management to one place, we can help you do that. And we'll share a link later on for folks that have never used us before. Lastly, be sure to stick around until the end of today's presentation, because at the end, we will be sharing with you some freebies, our guide to the ultimate go versus no-go grant RFP evaluation tool, more details to come over the course of the presentation. Now, with that housekeeping out of the way, I'm excited for us to kick things off. If you haven't already in the Zoom chat, it'd be great to hear from you. Put in your name, organization, what you do for your nonprofit, what your nonprofit's mission or latest initiative is, how familiar you are with Instrumentl, as well as potentially your biggest challenge related to grant prospecting. And while you all are doing that, I will give an introduction to myself and also let my counterpart, Mia, also do the same thing. So in general, that's the title of the presentation. So I'm going to go to the next one, which is I'm Will from Instrumentl. On a regular basis, we're hosting weekly grant workshops with expert educators and best-selling authors. Our company helps over 2,500 nonprofits as well as grant writing consultants in finding, tracking, and managing their grants every day. So every single day, we are hearing and seeing what blocks nonprofits from achieving their grant-seeking goals. And Mia, why don't you give a quick introduction to yourself as well?
Sure, Will, thank you. So my name is Mia, and a good portion of my job is to talk to nonprofits and grant consultants to better understand their challenges. I then take this feedback to our team, which then ensures to continuously improve Instrumentl so that it can serve our customers in the best possible way. I also have a nonprofit background, so I used to run my own organization for 3 years. And we had projects centered around cultural tourism, preserving cultural heritage, and fighting for social justice.
Awesome.
Good to be here. Yeah.
And as I mentioned before the start of this call, but I do want to make this really clear, since I want to manage expectations of those in the room. I see some customers. It's great to see you all. But just before we begin, this webinar is going to be primarily for people who are not using Instrumentl already yet. That being said, as I mentioned, if you want to stick around, you definitely are welcome to do so. But at the same time, if you want to say, hey, it was good seeing you, Will and Mia, that's cool too. No offense taken as well. So with that in mind, one of the questions that people often come to us around and ask is there a better way to decide if my organization should actually apply for a grant? The answer is yes. In fact, it's time for us to start changing the way that we're evaluating funders and focus on making informed decisions. So what we're going to do is we're first going to talk about our agenda for today. And then from there, what we're going to talk about is just the different parts to help guide you in this pursue or pass situation. So our agenda for today is we're first going to explore why is it even important to make informed decisions about grant applications. We're then going to go into step 1, which is preparing ourselves for grant readiness. Then step 2, which is around eligibility evaluation, followed by fit assessment to see whether or not we actually should go about this. And then step number 4 is timeline and feasibility evaluation, followed by step number 5, which is goal alignment and impact assessment. And we'll wrap everything up here today with a Q&A session at the very end as well. Mia, want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So just as a reminder, be sure to stick until the end of the webinar, because we have a very special 40-page resource that will help you with evaluating grant opportunities. So why is it important to make informed decisions about grant applications? It all comes down to effective resource allocation. So you need to focus on opportunities that actually matter for your nonprofit. And by accelerating the process of evaluating funders, you can get yourself more time to work on proposals and increase your chances of actually winning that grant. So it ties into long-term growth and impact for your nonprofit as well. So moving on to, so now that we've covered the why, let's see how we can make informed decisions about grant applications. We have extracted 5 different steps for you to confidently evaluate if you should apply for that grant, and that will be the main topic of this webinar. And of course, featuring Instrumentl, as Will made a nice intro, we are your all-in-one grants management platform.
Awesome. So in the next 5 to 10 minutes or so, I'm going to help set the folks up that are newer in the room who haven't created Instrumentl accounts in terms of helping better evaluate whether or not you should apply for that grant. From there, we'll then start digging into the exact steps of what we talked about in the agenda. So if you're new to Instrumentl, what's going to be shared in the Zoom chat right now is a link that you can click to go ahead and sign up. Mia, do you mind clicking that or sharing that with folks? And then in the meantime, I'll show you what you're going to land up on. It's going to be right here.
Yes, just a second.
And when you do that, you're going to land on this page. We're going to create our accounts together. In general, for me, my name is Will. I'm going to create my account real quick. And as you click through there, go ahead and set up a nice secure password. I think we require that you have at least like a capitalized letter, number, and symbol potentially. So I'm going to try to do that. Going to go ahead and set up for a 501c3 pass or pursue workshop. And then I'm going to choose my organization size, 501c3 status, and click there. Once you do that, if you would like, you can talk to our team later in terms of getting a strategy consult. In the case where you don't want to do that, you can click skip. I'm not going to take one of your guys' spots, so I'm going to go ahead and click skip. But I'm going to pause at this step, and I'm going to pause for folks that are clicking through the link just to get to this page and then give me a thumbs up. That way, from there, I can make sure I'm not going too far ahead of folks so that we can start working through our project creation. So what we're doing in the next 5 to 10 minutes is we're going to set up a project, which is going to be a saved workspace for all of the different things that we might want to be pursuing for a particular funding initiative for our organization. And that project is going to have a matches section as well as a tracker, which will allow us to save different opportunities, evaluate those opportunities, and then start to see all this different information in one place through our consolidated tracker. And that will then allow us to then start going through the 5 steps of pursue or pass. So when you are at this page, go ahead and give me a thumbs up, and then I'll look for a couple before I keep going in terms of creating our projects. And for folks that are in the room that also have Instrumentl accounts, if you want to create a new project together with me, I can give you some tips on project creation too. Feel free in the left side of your sidebar to click the plus project button, and then we can definitely go through this exercise together as well. So when you get to this screen in terms of let's help you find new funders, go ahead and go into the Zoom chat and give me a thumbs up. And then once I see a couple of those, I will go ahead and move on.
Yeah, I think I see some people who joined our webinar yesterday. So if you you can simply log into your Instrumentl account if you already created one.
All right, so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and keep going in terms of creating a project. I see a thumbs up from Andrew. Thank you for following along, Andrew. And so in this situation, what we're going to land on is this page where it's going to ask me where my organization is based out of. In this case, I'm going to use an example from one of the cities that were referenced earlier. Maybe we're going to do something in Florida. So let's go ahead and look into Florida. Maybe we'll go with Citrus County. And then from here, I'm going to choose my fiscal year. By default, it's going to be January 1st to December 31st. That said, if you do want to change that, for example, I know a lot of people are coming up on a new fiscal cycle on July 1st to June 30th. You can do so there. Hit that save and continue button. And at the next page, what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to type in the name of your project. And this is something where you can be either really broad or really specific. You can name it, for example, just after your overall organization, or what we usually recommend for folks is to be specific to a particular funding area that you're pursuing. So in the example of my organization, I'm going to pretend that I am an after-school tutoring program. And so I have a STEM program for middle school students. And that's what I'm going to call my project. From here, for applicant type, the bulk of you in the room are likely going to be nonprofits. And so select that. But obviously, if you fall into some of the other groups, feel free to select what's most apt for you. And then that question at the bottom is going to be asking you whether or not you'd like to see grants specifically for faith-based organizations or programs. And in this case, I'm going to say no, but if that does apply to you, feel free to go ahead and select yes and select the appropriate religious sect in that situation. As you reach this third step, this is where we're going to go into which areas our project serves. So I chose Citrus County, so I'm going to just go ahead and select that again. But sometimes you might be in the situation where your nonprofit is based somewhere differently than the actual areas that you serve. And if that is the case, then what we typically recommend is that you select a couple of the core locations of where your work is based out of. So in this case, maybe I also work in Citrus County primarily, but I also, cover Duval County or something like that. Then what you can do is you can select the different places. What we typically say is like, if you can avoid selecting the national in scope, that is preferred, just because if you select national in scope, it is the broadest approach to searching as opposed to being specific. It's way better to be specific and then for you to take a step back and look at things from a broader sense than it is the other way around. So always recommend going specific when you can. Yeah, I can definitely make it bigger. Amanda, thanks for the feedback. And also, LaShonda, a recording will be shared as well, along with slides here. All right. As we go into fields of work, this is where we're going to be talking about just the different areas of impact that our project relates to. So in this case, again, I'm an after-school tutoring program. So I'm going to look in education. And what I typically recommend for folks is if it's your first time ever creating a project, scroll through the entirety of the fields of work, because it's just a good way for you to make sure you don't miss something important. And then as you get more confident and familiar with the way that Instrumentl categorizes fields of work, that's when you might want to start to just like search by different keywords. But sometimes people miss important things just because like they're trying by keyword and not by actually browsing all categories. So in this case, I mentioned that I'm an after-school summer educational program related, and then also I'm a STEM-based program for middle school students. So as I scroll through here, I see an option for field of work around middle school. So I'm going to select that. And then from here, I'm going to go ahead and select And then another thing is I have STEM education, which is super useful for me. And I'm tutoring and mentoring as well. So the sweet spot for folks is anywhere from 3 to 5 fields of work is typically what you will want to select. Sometimes people get ambitious and select, I don't know, closer to 10 different fields of work, but like that's typically not the best construction of a project. In fact, my best piece of advice is stick to the 2 to 5 recommendation, and then you can go from there. So the next thing you can do is you can go ahead and select the size of grants you're looking for. In my case, what my recommendation is for a lot of organizations is if you're a smaller team, set your minimum to a grand or greater, just so that it's worth your time in terms of actually pursuing the grant. And then from there, I usually keep it at no max. And then you're going to want to select what your project is for. So this might be for project programs, general operating expenses, capital projects if you're building a new building or something like that. In my case, I'm going to select project programs and gen op because those are two of the most common funding areas that I'm going to pursue, and it has general operating expenses related grants are often some of the most flexible in terms of where the funding can be used. So once I select those two, I'm going to select save and exit. From here, I'm going to have an opportunity to invite other team members. Feel free to take a second and invite other team members that might be on your team. This could be your executive director, your VP of development. It could be just a fellow grant writer, an intern, whatever floats your boat there. And then click all done when you're ready. So once you have hit this point in terms of we have found X number of grants for you, go back into the Zoom chat, give me a thumbs up or give me a reaction through the sidebar as well. And I will look for a couple of those before we then hop back to the presentation. And then we're going to start to talk through the 5 steps as we start to apply what we just did in terms of sign up towards the next steps of pursuing and passing. So Alia just gave me a thumbs up. Thank you. Leah just gave me a thumbs up. Thank you, Dr. Leah. And we are going to look for a couple more. I know some folks sometimes take a little bit as they work through their fields of work. If you're struggling with your fields of work as well, feel free to type into the chat what your organization does. And then either Mia and I can, help you out in terms of coming up with a couple fields of work ideas for you. Awesome. I just got another thumbs up from Tony. Thank you so much for that heads up. Got another thumbs up from, oh, I just missed it. From Catherine, thank you very much. All right, I'm going to give it a minute or so, and then we're going to start digging into the steps here. All right, I'm going to hop back into my slides real quick. All right, so let's talk about the 5 steps when it comes to pursuing or passing on grant opportunities. The first step that you're going to want to explore is your overall grant readiness. This is a pretty big question, to be honest, and it's the topic of several hours worth of honestly classes we've run in the past. If you're looking for very particular, different approaches to answering this question, definitely feel free to go on our blog after this workshop and search for like grant ready as a question, and then you'll not only get long form content that helps you guiding in how you answer this question, but also you're going to have a couple courses that we've done in free workshops with partners in the past around this. But essentially the core thing that you have to first answer, since I know a couple of folks in the room here today are newer to grants, is your team even grant ready? And this often comes down to estimating how much time and bandwidth your team actually has. So let's talk about how we can actually go about doing so, and a couple of resources we can turn to as we gauge, your overall grant readiness. And the reason why we start here from a teaching standpoint is because if you're not grant ready yet, often can lead to a situation where your organization gets too excited about the idea of grants, but you can't actually put the bandwidth behind the effort in order to meaningfully make momentum or progress on winning grants. And so we typically make sure that you are actually grant ready before you pursue grants, just because it's the best use of everybody's time. So when talking about estimating time, it really comes down to how long a grant is going to take, depending on the different types of grants that you're applying for. There's a really handy document that I'll put the link to in the Zoom chat right now. But essentially, it is a resource that just talks about the time that it typically takes to work on different types of grants. And you can use, a similar grant as well that you've applied for in the past as a reference point. But what would be useful for you to do is, in the case where you haven't really dug too deeply in terms of grants in the past, you might want to just take stock of, in your typical work week, how much capacity do you have right now to even be allocating towards any grant related work? Is it just an hour a day? Is it 2 hours a day? Is it, 10 plus hours a day? Whatever it is, slot that away. And then also think about it in the structure of your organization to see how much collective time your organization has. And that leads me to the second point, which is then gauging, overall bandwidth. So this is where it can be really useful for you to sit down with your team and look at your overall calendars for the week and ask yourselves if there's any major events that could get in the way of completing a grant for its deadline, or just in general, how much time the team could devote towards grant prep every single week. One helpful strategy for you to do so is, if your team shares calendars with each other, it can be very useful to time box with your team, in which, for example, from 2 to 3 p.m. on every Tuesday and Thursday, it's grant time, or, it's grant review time, or some particular part of the process itself. If you're looking for other resources around this topic, like I said, this is a really big topic that a lot of folks in the space will talk about. We have two that would be really useful for you. The first one is your nonprofit grant ready? The Ultimate Readiness Guide. This is a resource that you can find very useful in answering this question. And then if you happen to be a grant writer in the audience today, we also have another resource that's called Is Your Client Truly Ready? How to Assess Client Readiness. And this was a class, it's an hour-long free class with Charmaine Jennings, who's a partner of ours. And so definitely check that out afterwards if you find yourself trying to answer this question. You're more of like a nonprofit generalist consultant that's trying to answer this question. So step number one, let's make sure that you're actually grant ready. There's a couple checklists out there as well that you can check out. Again, check out our readiness guide. I believe that within that resource, there are more additional things that you can explore there. With that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Mia for step number two when it comes to evaluating eligibility.
Yes, so step number two is all about evaluating eligibility. So it comes down to answering this big question. So does your organization meet all of the grant application requirements? So as you already know, grants may only serve a specific country, state, city, or a region, or you have to be an officially registered nonprofit with a 501c3 status, or a faith-based organization. So this second step is very important so that you don't waste your time on writing an application that will be basically useless because you're not eligible to apply. So read carefully when evaluating funders. And yeah, if you're unsure, you can ask the funder directly. And here you have a sample of an email. So by reaching out to your potential funder, you are also like covering another base, which is establishing first contact or a relationship with the funder. And it creates kind of a win-win situation, given the fact that funders also want to ensure that they are allocating funds to proposals, to grant proposals and nonprofits that align with their mission. So you will receive this presentation in the email, so you'll have a sample email to send to your potential funder.
Awesome. So when it comes to evaluating eligibility, a very useful way to do this is through Instrumentl. And what I'll share with you is an example here where what I've got here on the screen is my matches tab, where I can actually filter through opportunities quite quickly and review key information around eligibility. So for example, in this particular case, this is a food security project. You can see how this funder is talking about grants for not-for-profits across the globe. They commit to multi-year course support, and they also clearly outline who is not eligible as well. So if you go back into that account that we all just created, as you start working through your matches tab, this is a great opportunity for you to start to review some of the key things that funders are looking for. So the first thing that you're looking at here, just for folks that have never seen this before, is this is your matches tab. This is where all of your curated opportunities based off the project that we created about 5 to 10 minutes or so will land. And the nice thing about Instrumentl versus any other tool out there is that this is a saved search. So every single week, when there are new opportunities that relate to my STEM program for middle school students project, I'm going to get an email about that and then be able to hop back into Instrumentl and take a look at what's new. So the first thing I like to draw people's attention to is this filter option. And this filter has a lot of power packed behind it that not everybody takes advantage of. And so to kind of teach you, some of the quickest ways to navigate the matches tab, what I like to do is I like to tell folks, to just use some of the advanced filters to quickly cut down on the initial hundreds or so of matches that, Instrumentl has found for you. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to filter for opportunities that are specifically related to STEM education, since my program is around the STEM program. And I'm going to select STEM education, and I'm also going to select exact matches only. When you select exact matches only, what that means is that it's going to look for an exact match in the fields of work to STEM education. So I just went from 275 matches down to 38. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at, for step number 2 here in evaluating eligibility, based off what Mia said, I'm going to start looking at what is this funder looking for, and does it match my organization and who we are? And from here, what you can see is this is the Cigna K-8 grant. If you'll recall, I shared with you, I am a middle school after school tutoring program. So the first thing I notice is a match, exact match to STEM education. That's great to see. I also see applicant type is nonprofit. It is related to project program and education outreach. The first is one of the ones that I had selected in my project setup. And it's also located in the US, and my residency is also in the US. And so what I can see here is I can see the background behind this opportunity, as well as what they might be looking to fund. So in this case, they are looking for, let's see here, they are looking for particular summer or out of school, summer or out of school programs. Eligibility is a registered 501c3. So when it comes to this, we're going to start talking about this in just the next step or so. But from a initial eligibility standpoint, this is potentially worth exploring. We're going to talk a little bit further when we talk about fit assessment as to whether or not this is truly a good opportunity to explore, because there are a couple things to factor in here. For example, there's the fact that all the past grantees are in Pennsylvania. If you'll remember, my opportunity in terms of this organization is in Florida, but that's something that we can explore in step number 3. For now, I'm just going to click the save button and put it in researching because I need to follow up on this. And in this case, if I want, I like to use the notes section and just copy the eligibility information in here. And that way, when I save it and put it into my tracker, I'll be able to see the note as well. And then you can take that same approach in terms of evaluating eligibility again. So I'm going to do this one more time, and then we're going to hop into step number 3, which is where we're then going to look at fit assessment. So let's look at this opportunity here. If we can refrain from drawing in, that'd be great. In this case, we've got the National Science Foundation. So this is advancing informal STEM learning. So this is a funding opportunity for it is a funding opportunity for 150K to 3.5 million. That's notable. And the fields of work is STEM education. In this case, funding uses match project program, which was one of the ones I selected. It also, applicant type covers organizations. So what I'm going to skim through here is I'm going to look for what they're looking to fund. In this case, they're funding research and practice, informal STEM learning environments, equity and belonging, as well as well-being of individuals, They fund 5 types of projects. So I would look as to whether or not one of these relates to work that I'm doing. In this case, it would be formal educational programs, systems, or outcomes outside the scope supported by the program. Does not fund formal elementary, middle school, or high school graduate education, whether in person or online. So this is probably not a good fit for me based off of this criteria here in the line item here. So in this particular case, I have a couple options. I can keep in my queue, but what I also like to teach is a good practice of working through your queue. So in this case, I would click hide from this project. We've got a couple questions. I'm going to tackle them before I hop into step number 3. But Mary, in order to review how to get to exact match in the list, you're going to go click into filter. And from the filter, when you look down and see your fields of work, you're going to see the option to look for exact matches only. So first you can select the field of work followed by exact matches only. And you can do this across not only fields of work, but also location of project and residency. So this can be really useful if, for example, you're looking for all of the local opportunities that may or not be aware of that Instrumentl can find for you. So can be really useful in the case where you're looking to really zero in on something. So I'll use an example here. If I look at exact match only on Citrus County, you can see that this Duke Energy Foundation has an exact match to this particular county. So it really kind of zones in on, what's most relevant there in that situation. All right. And let's go ahead and hop back. Arnold asked, does it show all grant funding? You're going to have to specify your question there, Ruby. I'm not sure exactly how to respond to that right now. But it would essentially show from our database of about 13,000 active grants, which ones are currently available for you to pursue in funding. And also then from there, it would allow you to prune through like those opportunities themselves. Okay. So step number 3 here is around fit assessment. So the biggest, most important thing here to answer is, just because you're eligible, for example, just because you're a nonprofit and you meet that criteria, that first grant I saved, doesn't necessarily mean that that grant is a good fit. And so the best way to do this sort of alignment is to ask yourself what the funder's goals are, as well as their objectives. You'll notice a very quick exercise I took in the second example was I noticed that they didn't want to fund after school programs. And so that's a disqualifier for me, in which I'm not going to pursue that opportunity because it's not going to be interesting to me, because it's going to be a waste of both my time as well as the funder's time. And on the flip side of things, in the first example, that also potentially wasn't a best fit, because when we looked at what Instrumentl synthesized for me, you saw that, it was primarily funding Pennsylvania-based organizations and not necessarily Florida grantees. So as you go through this, there are some things you want to align on. And here are a couple things you'll want to jot down or recall as you start to look through this. You're going to want to look at things like giving priorities, project relevance, the funding history, and competitiveness. Let's talk about each of these in a little bit more detail. So when it comes to giving priorities, you'll notice how in the 2 examples I went over, there was a clear list of bullet points of like, these are the 5 things we want to fund. That is often going to be the case in a lot of funding opportunities. And that's why you kind of want to zoom in on when you're evaluating different grants. When you're talking about project relevance, that's when you want to look at, is there any specificity in terms of the types of, projects or programs that they like to actually fund? And a good way to look at that is by evaluating the 990 information. And we'll share a little bit about how you can do that more easily as well. And then funding history is answering that question that I just kind of posed, which is, are there any past grantees from my area that are represented? Because if, I am that Florida nonprofit and I'm looking at this opportunity where everybody that's getting funded is based out of Pennsylvania, the chances are pretty slim all in terms of that opportunity being worth pursuing. And lastly, there's questions about competitiveness. If you're looking for exact email templates that you can use to email funders and ask them specifically how competitive their program is, definitely check out in our blog library a workshop with Meredith Noble, where she has a template that she has repeatedly taught her students that that can be really useful in getting a gauge of that respective competitive score. All right, so the next kind of point that I wanted to cover is, in terms of funders giving priorities, the best way to kind of see that is what I just went over. Oftentimes there's that overview tab in Instrumentl. This is where you're going to see exactly what's going on. In this case, we've got a STEM learning case where, they're trying to advance new approaches and evidence-based understanding of developing and designing STEM learning opportunities. So that's interesting. And then again, like you can also look at the priorities in terms of the alignment of the opportunities here. And to answer your question, Ruby, we do include federal grants and local and state funding. There's actually a drop down in that filters that I shared earlier, where you can actually filter just for those opportunities as well. And then the other questions to ask is, what is the project that you want to get funded, and how relevant is it to the funding uses? So this is what I mentioned earlier in terms of, does this match up with the project that I created? In my case, I selected project program as well as general operating expenses. And so when I see something that matches to project program and general operating expenses, I think that's a really good sign. We talked about giving history and some questions to ask yourself. These are some of my favorites. Number one, can you identify at least 3 previously funded organizations that are similar to yours? Why do you want to look for this? There's a couple reasons. Number one, it just means that you're represented in terms of like the funding area of the past grantee. Number two, the beautiful thing about Instrumentl is one of its superpowers is you can actually reverse search nonprofits that are similar to you and see who is funding them. So just to repeat that, what that means is, if you take my example of an after-school tutoring program, if I know there's another STEM after-school tutoring program in my area, I can look up that organization and see who is funding them to then come up with another list of like local, regional, and nationally based funders. The other questions to ask, are you represented historically? What percentage of those funded are new grantees? I know as I say that, a couple folks in the audience are going to be like, how do you figure that out? Well, that's something that I can review in just a little bit, but Instrumentl also does make that very easy for you to figure out as well. That is a very important statistic because what we generally teach in all of our different trainings is you want to look for a 30% or higher threshold of giving to new grantees, because it means that the funder actually walks the walk when they say that they like to fund new grantees. There are sometimes funders who are pretty exclusive in their relationships, and they say they will fund new opportunities, but they don't really actually do so in the data itself. You also want to answer questions like, what is the median grant amount for new grantees? Does that align to your project budget? And in general, does your organization's impact areas align with the funder's 3-year historical giving by NTE codes? That's something in which what you can do is you can look at the funders' past giving trends to see specifically where they're funding the most in terms of their dollars. So this is an example of a 990 report in Instrumentl, but essentially what you can see is you can see that there's a giving by NTE code for folks where you can see specifically, oh, in this particular funder's case, education is the top quested area that this funder is funding. And you'll also see the grant amounts of what is the median amount, as well as, in general, where are the past grantees coming from. So kind of pop back into my example here, I'm going to go into my tracker. And I'm going to see if I can find any information about the Cigna Foundation, since this was that opportunity that I shared earlier that potentially was worth exploring further if I was able to validate that like it was of interest to me. So what you can do is, let's first go over what a tracker is, and then from there we can go into the 990 reports. So this is the second side of Instrumentl. Pretty much when you save matches from your matches tab, they go into your tracker. And this is essentially the upgraded version of what a lot of grant writers use in old school Excel spreadsheets, but it's super powered because essentially you can track everything in the same place. So notice how as I click into the Cigna K-8 grant, I have my opportunity notes, which I left earlier, as well as I have information about the funder profile as well that I can look at. So if I look at that left-hand side, whenever I see that 990 report tag, it means that Instrumentl is able to parse through the IRS data around this funder to give me more information about this. So in this case, what this will give me is information around what are their total assets, average grant amounts, median grant amounts. Those aren't as interesting to me as what I was just referencing when it comes to fit assessment. What I want to be looking at is, what is actually the giving average and median? Does it align to my actual goals? In this case, you can see in 2021, it started going down. 2020, probably an anomaly year because that was COVID times, but pretty much you can start to look at some of the trends of what exactly the funding opportunities have been. So here you can see in this particular case, there's been 8,155 awards in the last 3 years available of data, and it's pretty much been in Pennsylvania, so in Philadelphia itself. So what's really nice here is I can actually sift through here. If I wanted to search for keywords like tutoring, I can actually look for, which respective grants have come from tutoring and whatnot. In this particular case, though, I'm not really seeing anything too interesting right now. What's interesting here actually is, to me, is that this could be a misnomer, because when I see like all of it saying available upon request, it probably means that the way that the Cigna Foundation filed their taxes was they put all of their grantees as Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which might be where they're based. And so in this case, this is something where I'd have to do some more investigation, because there might actually be representation, but it wouldn't be captured just because of the way that the foundation submitted their taxes. But essentially from here, like, this is a good way that you can start to sift through the matches, and you'll always be able to access this in your matches tab as well. If you are working through different opportunities, you can essentially go into any of the ones where you see this 990 tab, and you'll be able to look at all these different insights in terms of what's going on with these different funders. For example, I see this one is a little bit more represented nationally, so I can go ahead and filter for Florida. In this case, as I look into Florida, I can start to see exactly what the funding cause areas are. If I want to download that, I also can download that if I'm an upgraded user. And then also what you can do is you can take a look at, okay, what percentage of people are going to, new grantees versus repeat grantees. In this case, it's about a 50-50 split, which is great to see. It means that I have a pretty decent shot if I were to start working on building a relationship with this funder. Similarly, this is a very interesting statistic in terms of openness to new grantees. The reason why this is really interesting, because this actually tells me a story. So in this case, what this is telling me is that the New York Life Foundation likes to play it a little bit safe when it comes to their giving in the first year. And that's why the median is 15K. And then over time, what happens is, we have a situation in which repeat grantees are getting 50K and onwards. So something to keep in mind is just like, what is the data telling you? And is this supporting your area of funding of what you're actually pursuing? Mia, do you want to go over this one and then go into step number 4?
Yes, of course. So just as a reminder, stay with us until the end so that you can get this awesome PDF. So it's a 40-page resource. I just mentioned it to you, Arnold, in the chat. So it gives a very comprehensive answer to how to find the best opportunities to pursue. And we're moving on to step number 4, which is how to establish a timeline and do a feasibility evaluation. So you need to be realistic about the due date and timeline for a specific grant. So typically it takes between 6 to 8 weeks, depending on the complexity of the project that you are trying to pitch. So you need to ask yourself, can you realistically complete it on time? And so this is how you can do it in a 3-step process. So you should figure out how many sections will your grant proposal have, and how long will it take for you to write each of the sections. So you need to take into account the word count, type of grant, and different types of factors that could influence the length of your grant proposal. Then you need to take into account the amount of time that you have to work on within, let's say, each work week, and then work backwards from that to figure out whether or not you can meet the deadline. So it's a good practice to finish at least 1 week early so that you have time to internally review the proposal.
Awesome. And when it comes to staying on top of your grant timelines, Instrumentl's tracker can be really useful here. Here's an example screenshot, and I'll show a live example in just a little bit. But pretty much what you'll see here is all the respective grants that are related to a number of different projects are all stored in the same place. It has all the deadlines, the statuses, the amounts, the next task, as well as the notes for the rest of the team. And if you're looking for, a more calendar view approach to this as well, we do also have a calendar approach where I'll show it in the actual slide in terms of the demo section, but this can be a really great way for you to also get a gauge of what's going on there. When it comes to staying on top of all the grant timelines, what we usually recommend is using a combination of tasks. And so this is an example here where, what we've done is we've created different tasks around sending the LOI, inviting the funder to a site visit, drafting a full proposal, and then finalizing the budget. So to kind of show you an example of this in real time, I'm actually going to just go ahead and log into another account of mine. And from here, what you can see is this is a more comprehensive tracker. This tracker is quite robust for a number of reasons. Number one, if I just want to look at, for example, the grants that I have planned, as well as maybe the applications in progress, I can do so. And it really just lets me zero in on stuff. If I want to look by a particular user on my team, because maybe I'm a multi-person team, I can also do that. And pretty much it just allows me to focus in on different things while having everything mapped in the same space, right? So if I click into this, notice how all of that beautiful funder profile information for the private foundations is mapped to the same record as well. This makes everything a lot easier to consolidate. And also a few things that I'll note for like more intermediate users that may not be aware of it is we released funder notes a little bit ago. And this is something that, you can definitely make use of, but if you save something at the funder notes level, it'll appear anytime you save around that funder. And that is, can be really useful in terms of like repeat relationships that you have, as well as any key contacts that you might have in terms of, folks at that organization. The other thing that you'll notice is that something I went over was task. And so what you can see here is I can create a task, report due, choose the type of task, and then choose the deadline. And what's going to happen is Instrumentl is going to ping me when that task is coming up. And now you can see that that task is coming up in 16 days or so. The other thing is all of this storage comes in the same place too. If I have a funder profile or portal that I need to log into on a regular basis, I can save all that information here, upload the documents here as well. And that makes it so that if I am pursuing this opportunity next year, it's as simple as me going to this more options button and clicking the duplicate button. And then from there, clicking duplicate and saving it again. And that from there will create a new opportunity. So really easy ways for you to just bring everything into one place. And to show you that calendar view that I was mentioning earlier, I'm going to do it across all projects to kind of show you its magic there. But essentially in this calendar view, what you can see is like, I've got a ton of deadlines coming up, all sorts of things in my grants world. And what I can do is I can actually filter this down to whatever it is that I actually want to look at. Really great way for you to have productive conversations with your team when it comes to like the sorts of work that you're working on next. And you can also add tasks directly from this funder view too. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Mia, who's going to go over step number 5.
Yes, when it comes to step number 5, it all comes down to goal and impact alignment. So you need to answer the question, does the grant help you reach your goals? And there are helping questions that that can guide you towards finding this rather challenging answer. So does the grant have a budget that is too small to make an impact? So if you have certain goals, but the funding that you are considering is not large enough, then it's definitely not worth the effort. Then are you squeezing yourself into a grant that really doesn't really move your organization's goals forward? So this is perhaps tempting to do, especially if you're a new organization. So trying to get the ball rolling and to secure the first grants, and then you are kind of like watching the eligibility of the grant and trying to fit yourself in there, even though it's not the best fit actually. So is the budget going to allow you to complete the full project, or do you need additional funding? And is the organization funding the grant in line with your organization's values? So those are the questions that can help you answer, does the grant help you reach your goals? And let's summarize these 5 steps. So first, it's important to do an internal evaluation to see whether or not your nonprofit is grant ready. We shared 2 useful resources with you so that you can meaningfully find an answer to this question. Then you need to answer the question, are you eligible to apply? Is this grant a good fit for you? Can you complete it in time? And does it help you reach your goals? So if the answer is no to any of these questions, you need to keep looking. So it's not the opportunity is not worth pursuing. And here's an interesting story. It's a story of Teresa, who is the Director of Development for Salesian Sisters of Tampa. She's also one of Instrumentl's most loyal customers. So she shared how Instrumentl fundamentally changed the way her organization works, especially in terms of finding foundations that truly fit her. That is her and her team and her organization's goals. So just for context, her organization used to spend up to 10 hours on grant prospecting, and they've managed with Instrumentl to decrease this time to just 1 to 2 hours of grant research. So this really tells us a lot about how useful platforms such as Instrumentl can help your team work more efficiently and get that time back so that you can actually work on proposals or developing your grant strategy or establishing relationships with funders.
Awesome. And with that, we're going to open up to Q&A time. I've got a couple questions to tackle. One of them was from Elsa, who asked, what's the best way to update your tracker when the funder does not select your LOI after you submitted it, or the funder never informed you the outcome of your LOI? And what I love is that Callie also shared how she does this, which is pretty much the intended flow, but I'm going to show it for folks just so that you can kind of see it. When you're in your tracker, let's say, for example, in this particular case, the LOI was submitted. And in this case, it was declined or you didn't hear back. What typically happens in this case is you would choose decline in this case. You can, if you want, it depends on how you like to use your statuses, choose abandon. But in this case, I would probably go with declined in that situation. And so let's say, just for example, that this happened last year. So I'm going to choose 2022. Then what I would do in order to set the reminder for myself to make sure that I follow up with this in 2023 is I'd go to more options and I'd go ahead and click the duplicate button. From here, just select 2023. And then from here, put it into planned. You can put an amount if you want. You can also potentially choose the latest inquiry date. In this case, I have one in August 1st, 2023 that Instrumentl's fed through. And then if I want to put different submission goals, I can, but otherwise I could say resubmission from last year's declined opportunity. And then once I go ahead and save that, what's going to happen is you will essentially see in this case, it's a little bit confusing because I have so many different versions of this, but you'll see the declined one that I had here, and you'll have the one that I planned here. And if I want, I can actually just go ahead and create a task here and just say check in. And I'll just make this a general check-in, and then I'd set that deadline. I believe it was August 1st, so I'll check in maybe 2 weeks before that, 2 or 3 weeks before that, and set that in place. And that's what I would do in terms of my tracker to make sure that I have everything. The other nice thing as an exercise for those of you that, we talked about earlier, coming up on a fiscal year, it can be useful to just prune your tracker. And so like if there's certain opportunities you want to change the statuses of, you can definitely go about doing that. Kwame mentioned having templates can really help when it comes to applying for grants. That's definitely true. In the case where you want to upload things into your document library, you can definitely feel free to do so either from the grant opportunity or from your document library here. The other thing that I wanted to share is there's another workshop that we've done with a partner in the past that goes over how to create decision matrices. And that would probably be a great follow-up workshop for folks that attended here today, because what you'll go into is actually how to define different criteria to help you when it comes to evaluating this sort of like good fit or not a good fit opportunity to pursue. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Q&A. Any questions? All right, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm going to keep going and go over some of the final stuff, including the freebies and stuff like that we mentioned at the start of today's workshop. If you learned something new today, we've got some workshops coming up. We've got 4 game-changing ways to use volunteering metrics for grant success with Gung Wang, who is the CEO of Civic Champs. We've got AI for grant writing, a panel discussion with a couple special guests. I see a hand raised in the audience. If you want to type into the chat, that'd be great. And also we have mastering the blueprint. So crafting compelling work plans and logic models for grant success with Elizabeth Bureaus. So you can check out the link later on, either in the slides, or Mia will also share it in the chat as well. All right. With that, if you want to follow up with us, you can contact Mia at instrumentl.com. These are 2 workshop codes we wanted to share with folks. So if you are new to Instrumentl and you want to save for $50 on your first month, you can use the code workshop50. If you are looking on an annual plan, you can save an extra month off with workshop to Mo. And that's for new customers there. To wrap things up here, and then I'll look for final scan through for questions. We are giving folks a live freebie that you can check out. All you need to do is go to the link in the responses there, and from there, complete the actions, and you'll get the resource on the ultimate go versus no-go grant RFP evaluation tool. If you want, feel free to invite a friend to our next event, complete the webinar feedback form, which will also be shared in the Zoom chat by Mia. And yeah, aside from that, feel free to create your account in the case where you didn't get to do so earlier today as well. With that, I'm going to scan through once more just to make sure I've covered all the key questions here. And we'll go from there. Yes, so Mona asked the link for the RFP evaluation tool. Mia just shared that in the Zoom chat. It's that subscribepage.com. Awesome.
I'm going to share the feedback form as well. So if you would take just a couple of minutes to fill out this feedback survey, it will mean a lot to us, because then we can make sure that the future events align with your interests and expectations.
With that, I think I had a hand raised from Mary. If Mary, you want to
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you don't want me to talk?
Oh, no, you can mention, you can
Sure.
too,
So I just have really quick. So we're pretty successful in what we do. I'm the founder. I've been doing it since 2009, but I have found the past 2 years that we do a lot of government stuff too. And we, with private funders like Bank of America, I know somebody noted in there that they love some of our grant proposals, but they tell us, oh, you were 0.00014 off, or, it's a DI sort of change. And even though you meet a diverse demographic and here's exactly what we want, And so I always find, I'm going to be honest, I'm going to be truly transparent here. I'm from Harvard Business School, everything. I find it from a business perspective very disheartening that many of these decisions, when all the data analytics say that you should be given this grant or offered this contract, that it sometimes just comes down to social emotional, challenges, demographics, whatever it might be. And that I know somebody in the chat said, Mary, just keep going. And I'm like, yes, that's all that we do. But it is disheartening when everyone says this is really just a numbers game. And it really is. If you apply to enough tailored opportunities, you get where you need to go. But a lot of the times, no matter what people say or what organizations or foundations say, a lot of times the decision to give the grant to you is really not based on the analytics or what you say or how well you tailor your message. Sometimes it's truly out of your control, even if you're the number one that they should be giving to, and that's what the numbers indicate to you. So, and somebody said to me, hey, Mary, what you need to do is set up meetings with these people. And that's exactly what we do. And a lot of times those individuals just conveniently never show up. And these are, heads of foundations, typically for corporations, or they just keep giving the vague, oh, well, you need some more DEI stuff, or, whatever. I do find it to be disheartening, but it's a fact of life. Failure is just one more step towards success. So anyway.
I'm not sure if there's a question there, but I do have a resource for you and others that might find it valuable there. If you look up, I believe it's Marin Base she actually has it might be on our YouTube channel, but essentially there is a class that she taught on behind the grant makers curtain. Maybe we can find it in the follow-up resources, but she was a former grant maker as well. And she actually shares more of like what some of those criterias are that often happens. And there's also a podcast series. We only did a couple episodes, but we did interview foundations, and that might be useful as well in terms of getting the other side of that perspective. But it's definitely a numbers game, but at the same time, there is always room for improvement in terms of the processes that folks can take. Specifically, for example, there's a practice that one of our teachers our partner teachers has constantly reinforced with their students, which is like, if you're not asking for feedback from funders on a regular basis and making that simple action, that can make a big difference. And I'll put the funder feedback one in the Zoom chat there, but you can check out, that free class as well, just to get some initial thoughts there. It is definitely a 50-50, but like, as mentioned, it's about the shots you do hit on, and you give yourself the opportunity by being able to even get that feedback by making that ask. So with that, we are at time. So thank you so much for everybody for joining us today. Hopefully you learned a thing or two, and maybe we'll see you in the coming days for one of our upcoming workshops. Thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in, and until next time.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.